All right. So when you're taking your daily weight every single morning, some people tend to freak out if they see the scale go up 2 or 3 pounds. Or you're tracking the scale, every day and you see that number go up and you get freaked out. So where is that actually coming from? Is it fat gain? It's obviously weight gain, right? But is it fat gain? So we're going to kind of dive into this and kind of get a better understanding of what's actually going on when this happens. So the overnight change. So you wake up, you're 3 pounds up on the scale. Did you really, in fact, gain that much body fat overnight? Well, I will say, calm down. You did not gain 3 pounds of body fat overnight. So we know just by looking at the numbers, right, to gain 1 pound of fat, you need to be in a 3,500 calorie surplus, which, kind of makes sense, right? Like to lose a pound of fat, you need to be in a 3,500 calorie surplus. Divide that by seven, that's 500 calories a day, right? That's typically why if you see people give advice on how to start a fat loss diet, right? You subtract 500 calories, from your daily, and that's kind of how you're supposed to get started. So that's kind of, where that 500 number that people typically throw around comes from. But if the scale jumps up, it's not fat gain. The majority of the time, it's water, glycogen, and stomach volume is what's adding to that actual mass gain. So the scale often lies a lot, and if you aren't, staying on top of that and keeping that in the back of your mind, it will freak you out. So I would like to say there are three pillars of weight fluctuations. So, number one is going to be a glycogen. So, with every gram of glycogen, you're going to get 3 to 4 grams of water to accompany that. So, if had carbohydrates added in this week, just know that there's also some water that's going to come along with that. You can't avoid it. It's just one of those things. With glycogen comes water. So again, that's another added mass that's going to be added to the scale, right? Number two is going to be inflammation. Now, we need inflammation, right? Inflammation is a good thing. Repairing muscle tissues requires inflammation. So, kind of a sidetrack to this. That's why it's not a good idea to take anti-inflammatory medications if you can avoid that, if all possible. Because if you just did a leg workout, right, and you're sore, your legs hurt, your body is inflamed, right? Taking an anti-inflammatory, which is what helps repair muscle tissues, is not a good idea. Kind of a sidetrack thought there, but um, with inflammation comes water retention, and that's why a lot of the times, the majority of that scale weight that goes up is just mainly water. It's fluid retention, and so again, kind of these first two have to deal with water. Now, number three is digestion. So food volume. So like, if you were to go, I don't know, eat a pound of chicken, right? And it's now inside of your stomach, right? If you step on the scale, you're going to show that pound of chicken is now relayed to the scale, right? If that makes sense. So again, it's more or less about mass is being added to the scale, not necessarily body fat. And that's why I say the scale lies, because a lot of times if you see somebody who's in a fat loss phase and they're sticking to everything, on point, they're 10 out of 10 across the week, and they step on the scale and they're 2 pounds heavier. What in the world did I do wrong? Right. More than likely nothing. It's one of these three things that have caused the scale to go up. So again, just reiterate this in your brain. Your scale measures total mass, not just fat gain or fat loss. So it works on both ends of the spectrum. So now we need to look at the salt and water connection. So obviously, you've seen that the first two pillars, they all dealt with salt, right? And then I guess number three could also, kind of go into, water as well too. If you drink a gallon of water, that's going to put a lot of water weight just on your stomach, right? And again, that mass is transferred then to the scale. But along with water is accompanied sodium. So first and foremost, let's just get it out of the way. Sodium is not the enemy. There's a particular workout program here in town. There's one in Greenville. There's one in Spartanburg that loves the no sodium aspect. Um, and we know just by basic knowledge of nutrition that you need sodium, right? So for instance, if you have a lot of high salt in your diet, you're going to temporarily hold water, right? And if you have low salt in your diet, you're going to be dehydrated, right? Because water follows salt and salt follows water. Those two are two very important things that if you're doing like a contest prep for a bodybuilding show, salt has to be highly regulated, water has to be highly regulated, and so does potassium as well too. But kind of one follows the other. So there's really like unless you have like adverse health effects, to where like you have heart issues and things like that, like. I'm not going to say high sodium is best or low sodium is best. The main thing is just be consistent with the sodium, right? I mean, I would say that I'm probably on the higher level of the sodium spectrum, right? Just because I eat a lot of food and I season all of my food. And so where you get into trouble is the big swings with the sodium intake. So if one day, you had this much salt and the next day you had this much salt, for sure, that scale weight is going to go way up because again, you're going to be holding more water. That's why that if you go eat a cheat meal, a lot of the times, yeah, the greasy, nasty food that you just ate, will bump the scale up a little bit, but the majority of that is loaded with sodium, and you're holding a lot of water weight. So again, just looking at sodium, kind of as a whole, though, keeping that sodium consistent is going to be the biggest key there. Cortisol, the big stress variable. Now, we probably speak about cortisol every single week. I could probably go back and look at every video that I've ever done, and in some way, shape, or form, I mentioned cortisol because we do talk about it a lot, and it's very important. But stress will make you hold water. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If you've ever done a bodybuilding show, if you've ever looked into that aspect at all, you know that the week before the show, you need to be as calm as you can be, but you're about to get on stage and barely nothing, right? In front of a lot of people, your stress is going to be high, right? And that's why in phases like that, you really have to control your stress levels because stress will make you hold water. And in those aspects, it makes you look blurry, and not as in shape as you truly are, right? But in more or less of a, real life scenario, if you're just having stress from a job, relationship, kids are bad, whatever the case may be, like just normal day-to-day stressors, that's going to make your stress levels go up and in turn, make your cortisol go up. And then in turn, just makes you hold more water. And so a lot of the times, if you are in a fat loss phase and you are losing fat, but you are a highly stressed individual, you have a lot of stuff going on, and you are holding extra water weight, that extra water weight is going to mask any kind of fat loss that you have going on, right? So kind of the mechanisms behind this is going to be when you have cortisol spike up, it triggers aldosterone. And the result of once aldosterone gets spiked and stays elevated, your body wants to hold on to water and protect itself. It sees that as a very stressful event and it just kind of hangs on to everything. And then, kind of on the other side of the coin, right? If you're in a state to where you're dieting, you're in a low calorie consumption. We all know that your body kind of goes into that protect itself mode again, and that's because that cortisol spikes up, right? And this is the main reason why fat loss stalls in high stress weeks. If you have a job that is very, very stressful and you have a week, you know, where you go on vacation or you're very laid back or the boss is gone, the weights tends to drop out that week and you really didn't do anything different. It's because, again, fat loss stalls in those very high stressful weeks. And, kind of how you can mitigate that is, taking supplements like ashwagandha. A good, kind of baseline to that is 600 milligrams right before bed to hopefully get you some good sleep that night. And then obviously trying to use like meditation techniques like box breathing, humming to stimulate that vagus nerve. More or less things to just bring yourself off of that high fight or flight mode back down into that rest and digest state. And so the solution to this is just have enough data. I was doing check-ins today, and I run into this every single time I do check-ins. I'm not speaking to anybody directly, but I will say this every single time. The 7-day averages is what is best, not a single weigh-in. For instance, I had a client that had a check-in yesterday. His check-in from last Wednesday to today showed he had a 4 pound gain over from last Wednesday to this Wednesday. But last Wednesday to Tuesday, the scale actually dropped out a lot. And when I did the average, he was down 2 pounds across the week, even with that 4 pound gain from Wednesday to Wednesday. He had a bad night of sleep the night before. That's what showed it. So if we only did one weigh in, right? Wednesday to Wednesday, I'd have said, man, this dude gained 4 pounds. He told me he was 10 out of 10, out of 10. This dude lying? Is he really doing what he's supposed to be doing? Like, wh where's the misconnection here, right? But again, because he gave me those 7-day averages, I could see that instead of a 4 pound jump, it was actually a 2 pound reduction. And we were actually to keep making progress and actually make a change in his reverse diet. So, if you're watching this and you don't give me 7-day averages, let's shoot for five. One is, five is better than one, right? Any more data that you can give me, the better. And that's for anybody. If you're not even a client of mine and you watch this on YouTube, um, the more data that you can give your coach, if you're self-coached, the more data that you can give yourself, the better off that you'll be. And then if you track things like measurements, how your actual clothes are fitting. I actually had a lady this morning in her check-in say that when she started, whenever she hooked her bra, she was hooking it at the very end, right? And today, I think she's 2 or 3 months in, maybe. She's hooking it on the very last loop. So those are great ways to kind of gain and collect data as well too. And you all just have to keep in mind, right? Fat loss is a slow burn, and it can be masked by water. So, just because that the scale is not dropping each and every week, you have to kind of step back, and make sure that hey, are you doing these stress mitigation techniques? Are you really hitting everything every week that you need to be doing? And if you are, it's okay. It's okay. Just keep going. Weight does not just, linearly go down. It kind of goes in spurts. So you'll lose a good bit of fat, it'll stall out. You'll lose a good bit of fat, it'll stall out. So you just have to stay the course. The drop is coming. You just have to be consistent with it and don't get too attached to the scale. Because at the end of the day, that scale shows a change in mass, not a change in body fat. Um,